Welcome to Lesson 8 in Through the New Testament in Ancient Greek for Absolute Beginners. My name is Helene Istay, and I'm your guide as we read through the New Testament in its original beautiful language, the language of ancient Greece, which coincidentally was called Helene Istay. Because each lesson will build on previous lessons, be sure to start with Lesson 1. Let's get started. All right, in today's lesson, we're going to go through the first 12 verses of Matthew 5, which is the Beatitudes of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. Our topics are going to be, first of all, to review all of the parts of speech that we've learned up to this point, that is everything except verbs, and pronouns besides the personal pronoun, which we've already talked about. We're also going to talk about how to do Greek word studies, and the importance of Greek word studies. As long as you're learning ancient Greek, you might as well know how to understand what they meant by each word in the ancient Greek. And then we're going to learn about accent movement. So sometimes the accent will move. It'll bounce over to the syllable to the right. And why does it happen? We'll talk about that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the substantive use of adjectives, which we've referred to a little bit before, but today we're going to talk about it a little more, using adjectives as nouns. All right, so let's get warmed up with reading Matthew 5, verses 1 and 2. Idonde tous aklous anebe eis ta aras, kai kathisantas autou pros elthan auto, hoi mathetai autou, kai anoixas ta stama autou, ed didasken autus legon. All right, here is our handy dandy color chart for all of the different parts of speech that we've learned so far. Violet for adverb, article is red, conjunctions are coral, nouns are navy blue, prepositions are purple, adjectives are jade for adjective, personal pronouns are pretty pink. So in this verse, we want to point out our articles, and we have 4 articles here just to remind ourselves what they were. So Jesus here has seen the crowds, and the crowds being the object of seeing are going to be an accusative, masculine plural for aklous, aklous, tous, aklous. That's accusative, masculine plural to match the crowds. And then he went up on the mountain. Eis is with accusative, so that's accusative, neuter, single for the accusative, neuter, single, mountain. Ta. And again, we have our reminder down here, and that's the same. Ta is the same in the nominative and the accusative. And then we come down here, we have the disciples came to him. So hoi mathetai. That's the nominative because it's subject. Hoi being nominative, masculine plural. And finally, Jesus opened his mouth. The mouth of him. So in English, we would say his mouth, but usually we won't even say that. This is a kind of a common Hebrew type of way of saying things. So instead of he said, which they also say, they also mention that he opened his mouth in parables, or he opened his mouth to say. So ta, stama here is accusative, neuter, single for stama, which is a neuter. And the article is going to be ta then. And again, it could be nominative or accusative, ta. Next part of speech we want to talk about is choral. We skipped over adverb, by the way, because there are no adverbs in these 2 verses. But we'll talk about some adverbs later. So our common ones are de, which is postpositive after the first word, then or now or and, or sometimes it's but, and then kai and kai. So that's pretty straightforward. And then we have our nouns. Here we have a plural masculine noun, aklous, which is the plural of aklas, which is a singular. And then aras is the neuter noun, meaning mountain or high place or hill, depending on kind of relatively speaking where you live. And then here the plural for mathetes is one disciple, and then mathetai is plural disciples. And then here's stama. So our stomach is where our mouth leads to, basically. Stama. And you also get that stoma of, if you guys know about leaves, they have little holes in them that are called stoma. So that's where the little mouths that get the water from the air. All right, next we have one preposition, ace. And we've seen ace a lot. And I always remember ace in the hole, ACE, is accusative, A for accusative. Ace ta aras. So it's on the mountain, and we have accusative after it. And then finally, our pretty pink personal pronouns. A little bit of a tongue twister there. All right, so we have he sat down. So in this case, we're going to talk about this later because we have a little clause here, and it's called a genitive absolute. And the genitive is used for that reason, and we won't talk about it any more than that. So autou, remember, is masculine, singular, genitive. And then the crowds came to him, autou. So to him is autou, and that's also a neuter, but in this case it's Jesus, so it's masculine. And then the disciples of him, autou, is of him again. And then his mouth, autou again. And notice how it doesn't matter if there's plural. If it's of him, it just stays autou. It's not auton because disciples is plural. It matches the person who has the disciples. So one person, Jesus, autou. Autou, again, for a singular mouth. So it doesn't matter whether what he has is singular or plural. It's always going to be of him, autou. And then he was teaching them, autous. So that's accusative, masculine, plural. All right, let's move on to this next verse. I have a few things circled here so you can notice the pattern. We have a nominative, masculine, plural article going all the way down. And then we have hati, hati, hati. That's a conjunction, which means for or because of. And then auton, autoi, 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 the personal pronoun. Autoi, they, auton, theirs. So they basically, there's just a little difference there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and read. Makarioi hoi petokoi to pneumati hati auton estin he basileia ton uranon. Makarioi hoi penthuntes hati autoi paraklethe santai. Makarioi hoi praes hati autoi. All right, I'm going to sound out the syllables for this one because it's a little bit challenging. Clay, ra, na, me, susin. Clay, ra, na, me, susin. Clay, ra, na, me, susin. Clay, ra, nu, me, susin. Tain gain. Makarioi, hoi, penontes, kai dipsontes, tain dikaiosunein. Hati, autoi, kortas the santai. Beautiful. All right, so let's go ahead and study this word, makarios. This word means blessed or happy, and we'll get into a little bit more understanding of what that means. But we've talked about dikaios in a previous lesson when we talked about the endings of adjectives and how they match our definite article endings. But let's go ahead and go through these real quick. Makarios, makarie, makarion, makariu, makaries, makariu, makario, makarie, makario, makarion, makarien, makarion, makarioi, makarii, makarii, makarion, 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 Makarios, Makariais, Makariois, Makarius, Makarias, Makaria. And I noticed there's an error here. This actually should be Makarien, Makarien. So the accent should be on the alpha. This shouldn't move. So we'll get into why that's the case, but that's good. I just pointing out that error there is helpful for me to kind of remind you that there is going to be a change in where the accent is. All right, so now what you can do if you aren't sure exactly what they mean, because blessed is not really a word we use a lot in English, and it usually has kind of a strange, kind of holy meaning that isn't always necessarily what the ancient Greek writers were trying to get across. So one thing you can do is when you see, I'm just going to back up here. you see this number above each word. That's the original form. It's called the Strong's number, 3107. And you can actually click on that and you'll get a report like this. It tells you makarios is the word. So it's makarios, makaria, and makarion. Oops, I made another mistake. So instead of makarie here, this should be So sometimes things are a little different. And I was just starting with dikaios, which is dikaie in the feminine nominative singular. So that should be makaria. So please forgive me. All of these little changes are not always, I don't always catch them when I make the slides. So makarios, makaria, makarion. Adjective, transliteration. This helps you see what it would look like in English if you aren't familiar with the Greek letters. How it's pronounced, makarios. And then the definition, this is a really quick one. Blessed or happy. Usage, happy, blessed, or to be envied. Like people would look at you and say, wow, they've got everything going that I want. All right, and then there's some other word studies down here. It's usually used when God extends his benefits or describes a believer in an enviable position from receiving God's favor or provisions. So this is really helpful. One thing that I've invested in is Bible software, and I get it from Logos. This is a Logos Bible software. You can see up here. This will comes with a lot of different references, and my favorite reference is the Greek English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature, which you can see up here is the Logos version. And you can actually look up, in this case I've got makarios, looked up, and this is everything that you'll read about makarios. If you're really interested, or if you're doing like a Bible study and you really want to understand what Jesus is talking about, you can go through, and it says being fortunate or happy because of your circumstances, to be favored. That's kind of the usage here, is that you're privileged. God is blessing you. He's giving you his good gifts. And you can see all the different ways that this word is used in even Christian writings outside of the Bible. So it's very useful for finding out exactly what other ways it's been used in early Christian writing, and basically how it's probably a little bit different than just happy. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the substantive use of the adjective after having read this. There's two examples of adjectives that are used as substantive nouns, or basically adjectives used as a noun. And we have the same thing in English. So hoi patokoi, for example, ho patokoi is the poor. So patokos, I've put it over here. Patokos is the adjective. And interesting, it's one who crouches. So usually the poor would be crouching down and begging. So that's kind of where it comes from. But using this with the definite article, hoi, it changes from just an adjective to a noun. So the poor ones, or the poor people. Blessed are the ones who are poor. So in English, we would say the same thing, the poor. And then same down here, the meek. And I looked up meek in Bible Hub. Again, you can find it quickly also by typing biblehub.com/Greek/4239 is the Strong's number, .htm. And here you can see that the word for mild or gentle is praus. Praus, praia, prau is masculine, feminine, neuter. Adjective. And this means meekness or mild and gentle. So you can look down here. This doesn't give a whole lot of explanation. I usually turn to Logos when I want my Logos Greek software to get more depth into this. But I just wanted to show you what it means here. The meek, the people who are meek. They're not insisting on their own way. They're not going about and trying to achieve, even though, obviously they probably are very smart. Doesn't mean that they're weak. But it just means that they're meek and gentle and kind and that type of thing. All right, so those are the substantive uses of the adjective. Let's go ahead and keep reading. Makarioi hoi eleemanes, hati autoi elei thesantai. Makarioi hoi katharoi, te cardia, hati autoi tantheon opsantai. Makarioi hoi ere na poioi, hati autoi huioi theu klethesantai. Makarioi hoi dediogmenoi, haneken dikaiasunes hati auton estin he basileia ton uranon. One point here, I circled this preposition, Henneken, on account of. All right, so talking about Henneken, it originally was just Henneke, and over the years it became Henneken. I'll show you where I found out about that. But basically, this is a preposition that means for the sake of, on account of, wherefore. We don't really use wherefore in English, but you can see all the other places that it's used in the Bible on this same page if you go to that 1752 Strong's number. Let's go ahead and move on to what I can see in my BDAG, which is the abbreviation for the New Testament lexicon that is in my Logos software. Henneke, it was started to become used as Henneken from the 3rd century BC on. So in the Bible, we have it, in the New Testament, we have Henneken, but in ancient Greek, the normal way they would use it is Henneke. And you can see all the different ways that it's used. Basically here, number one is it functions as a preposition with the genitive to indicate cause or the reason for something. So you're persecuted because you are being righteous, because of your righteousness. Another way that's used is a marker of objective or purpose, in order that. This is a little different because that would mean that you're in order because you want to be righteous. That's different. So here it's because of your righteousness, not because you want to be righteous. So that is not the meaning in this case. All right, let's go on to the next verses. Makarioieste hatan anedisosin humas kai dioxosin kai aposin pan poneran kath humon pseudomenoi Henneken emu kairete kai agaliaste hati ha misthas hemon paulus en tois uranois hutos gar edioxan tous prophetas tous pra hemon. Just want to point out again these prepositions, another occurrence of Henneken. In this case, if people are saying all kinds of evil about you because of Jesus. Henneken emu. Love that. Henneken emu. I always remember that when somebody says something about me being Christian in a critical way, and I just think, I'm doing this for you, Lord, and I'm not going to fight back. Henneken emu. All right, against, over here we have against. Kaf, that is a change from kata. Kata hemon is wrong. It doesn't sound right to the ancient Greeks. So they changed it before a strong breathing mark. They changed it to the theta, kath humon. Sometimes you'll see like katonar. That's before a smooth breathing mark. That would be K-A-T, kappa alpha tau. Here we have kappa alpha theta before a rough breathing mark. And then against is followed by a genitive when they're talking about being against you, being contrary to you. And then pra hemon is before, and you guys recognize this from pra, like before something. So pra is an ancient Greek prefix, and you'll see that also combined with other verbs. But here it's followed by the genitive. All right, just a few more things about conjunctions. Hatan. Hatan here is when. So you're blessed when they insult you. When they insult you. Hatan. And then for, you've seen hati before. Before we've used it, it's like because of, or so that, or introducing something that you're about to say. He said that, you would use hati. But here, for means because. In other words, you're doing these things because your reward will be great in heaven. Hati. And then gar here is for. Again, it's different meanings. So even though it's the same English word, it's a different type of for. Because they persecuted. For they persecuted. Because is kind of the word, the meaning here of gar. Because they persecuted the prophets before you. All right, let me note a few of these personal pronouns. Pretty pink personal pronouns. We have humas. That's accusative plural. So humas, right here, you all. And against you is going to be genitive after kata or kath, humon. So genitive plural. Emu. Now here's an example of when emu is used instead of just mu. In this case, I think it's for emphasis. Because of me, because of Jesus, because you're doing something for me. All right, so emu, and that's in this case a genitive. Humon, again, genitive, the reward of you belong. That's kind of a possessive, your reward. And then finally, before you is followed by the genitive plural, humon as well. The prophets before you, genitive. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the adjectives and adverbs in these two verses. So the first one is makarioi. Makarioi. We already looked at that one, so we won't do that again. But just notice that it's nominative, masculine, plural, because it's talking about you, the subject. You are blessed. So that's nominative, masculine, plural. And then we have pon. Pon, all kinds of, all right? So pon is usually all kinds of. It can also mean the whole thing, but in this case, all kinds of evil. Here is the adjective used as a substantive noun, in this case, evil things. They say all kinds of evil things against you. So that's another adjective used is in the substantive way. And then hutos, thus, in this way, they persecuted the prophets before you, in this way. So hutos, thus. All right, let's go ahead and look at just a little reminder of a few things. We have upon. In this case, all kinds of is accusative, neuter, singular. They say these things, so it's accusative because it's the direct object of say. And it's just neuter because it's all kinds of things. It's kind of a generic thing. So that's pon right here. Neuter, accusative, singular. Poneron. And then let's see, we have another one, I think. Yes. So here I've gone ahead and declined this adjective, and it's going to pretty much closely match the definite article endings. There's always a little differences, but in this case it's poneras, ponere, poneran, poneru, poneres, poneru. This one should have a circumflex accent that I forgot to put there. Ponero, ponere, ponero, poneran, ponerain, poneran, poneroi, ponerai, ponera, poneron, 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 ponerois, ponerais, ponerois, and ponerus, poneras, ponera. Now in this case, poneras, ponerare, poneran all start with the accent on the last syllable. So it can't move anywhere. I'm going to show you how it moves. We're just going to back up here. All right, so here with makarioi, we have it on the, usually we talk about it being on the last would be the ultimate, the second to last would be the penultimate, and then you have it on the third to the last here. So whenever you have it on the third to the last syllable, and you add anything to the end of that word, you have to move it over because these accents can't go any further to the left than the third to the last syllable. So whenever you add something that has oo or o, long vowels, ace and a, oo and o, own, ois, ice, and ois, those are all going to be long. So to make up for that long, which counts as 2 syllables, you have to move it over. So in this case, it's makarias because you just have 3 syllables, makarias. But here, because oo counts as 2 syllables, you can't have it on the ka anymore. You have to move it over. So you have 1, 2, 3. It's the third one in. This counts as 2. O also counts as 2. Omega is a long vowel. So makario, makario. And this one stays because on is just a short vowel. So this is still the third to the last syllable, third to the last syllable. Here, own counts as 2 syllables. So this is the third to the last syllable, counting own as 2 syllables because of the long vowel. OI, or omega iota, is also counts as a long vowel. So you move the accent over. And then omega upsilon is also a long vowel as that diphthong. And so you have to move the accent over. So it can't be any further to the left than the third, remember. So the same rules for these. I won't go through all of those. But that's basically a very simple way of describing how the pronunciation changes, and it has to do with musical reasons. It just sounds better that way. But don't worry about accents. In fact, a lot of Greek students don't even bother to learn the accents. I'm just including them here in case you're curious. We've reached the end of Lesson 8. I am so glad that you've been joining us thus far. I want you to continue to work on this, even though it gets a little confusing. It'll be worth it. And I really hope that you were blessed by today's lesson. See you next time.